We have a couple of questions for our panelists about their own feelings on the last 30 years of US-Slovak bilateral relations, where it has gone, where it started, where it's going. And so we'll start with the foreign minister. Sir, looking back on the past 30 years, how do you personally feel about the state of the relationship? What do you think the relationship has brought Slovakia, and how would you characterize it?
It is very personal because my first posting was in the United States, my first diplomatic posting. And I would say that the last 30 years is a great partnership between the United States and Slovakia. And we are allies, we are friends. The U.S. played a significant role in our transformations after the Iron Curtain has fallen, and we cooperate in many areas. Obviously, after in the 90s, we all hoped for a bright future. And there were discussions and there were even books about it, calling called "End of History." And I think what we saw in the recent years that there is no end of history, and unfortunately, the world is quite complicated now. And what is important in this complicated world is a strong partnership and. We have it with the United States, but I must say also that there were some mistakes during those 30 years. I would say that our counting on a peace dividend after the Cold War wasn't perhaps the best things to do, and that we somehow didn't put enough resources on institutions like Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. In the past couple of years, it was a mistake because they served us very well during the Cold War, and there was a brief period of what looked like a good picture. But nowadays we are again in a situation that we are fighting for democracy and we are fighting for freedom, even here in Europe. And we need strong institutions, and we need to have a good strategy how to move forward together in this fight.
Thank you very much. And then, sir, to our own ambassador, now as you look back at your first year here, how would you characterize it?
Yeah. So let me begin by just saying my deepest thanks to my friend and colleague, Foreign Minister, for being here, to the library for hosting us, but mostly to this man. He's the guy who's brought us here together, because of his book. I strongly recommend everyone read the book because Pavel has done just an amazing job of recounting the richness and the depth of our shared history, the relationship that we've had bilaterally. He explains the incredible levels of ties of collaboration that we've had, the high-level visits, the number of people who've come, and the depth and the breadth of our relationship. One of the things that I think we focused on the 30 years, I'll talk about my year here, but the U.S.-Slovak relationship is quite long. After the Irish, percentage-wise, more Slovaks immigrated to the United States than any other country in the world. Today, in the United States, we count almost 3 million people of Slovak heritage in the United States. Slovaks built the great Midwest cities of the United States, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Chicago. They worked in our steel mills. They worked in the coal mines. They helped make America what it is today. Earlier this year, we put together an exhibition, a traveling exhibition of 40 notable, 40, it was 40, right? 30, sorry, 30. There are so many more that should have been added to the list. But 30 notable Slovak Americans. And it's a who's who of American history, of culture. Really, it's quite extraordinary. And the United States has reciprocated here in Slovakia. Czechoslovakia began as an idea in the United States. The Cleveland Agreement of 1916, the Pittsburgh Agreement of 1918, Wilson's 14 points. So there's a very long extended history that brings our peoples together. And if you look at the last 30 years, which Pavel does extraordinarily well in his book outlining, we see the trajectory of the relationship and how it, particularly after joining NATO and the EU, our ties have grown ever closer. And what we have today, yes, absolutely, there are challenges, and history never ends and will never end. But I always say this because I truly believe it. I am maybe the most optimistic man in Slovakia because I have a great deal of faith and optimism and belief in the Slovak people, and that comes from having been here a year. You have demonstrated over the course of your short but long 30 years of surviving the challenges that have come on democracy, rule of law. I'm confident that you will continue being a strong NATO ally. You'll be a terrific partner in the EU. And what has the last 30 years brought Slovakia? It's brought security, because you are a member of NATO, you are firmly a member of Europe, and I think the European Union and our trade relationship has brought a great deal of prosperity to the Slovak people. Just one simple statistic showing the depth of the relationship and how quickly it's grown. In 2016, the amount of bilateral trade, not much by some of the standards of the countries here, but it was about 2.7 billion. Just 5 years later, we had almost doubled it to 5.6 billion. And so we have strong economic ties. There's lots of great U.S. investment here. We have strong military and security ties, and we have a long, rich history. So there are challenges. I think we will meet them. I think we will meet them together, and I'm very confident about the trajectory of this country.
Thank you. I agree.
Thank you, sir. And now, Pavel, over to you. And would you also please tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this book? This is a second edition, the first one having been published at the 100th anniversary in 2018, the Pittsburgh Agreement. So please tell us a little bit about that as well.
Thank you very much, Tammy. But first of all, I'm amazed that tomorrow is our public holiday and all of you came. Because this was very risky. Not only Gautam Rana came a year ago, but Pope Francis was here 2 years ago, and he sent his state secretary, Mr. Cardinal Parolin, and I know that there were many competitions, particularly for you diplomats, so greatly appreciated. But each of you played some part in my private life, working life. So all of you are my friends in the room, and I value that we will be in this space. Secondly, most of us never been to this space. This is new addition to University Library, and I know University Librarian Sylvia Štaselová is a dear friend of mine, and we organize all kinds of things, but never here. And this is Rajská zahrada, or Garden of Eden, where we will have, after this reception, where each of us would be able to be together and spend just good time. So this is experimental thing also for me. Miroslav, I hope you've never been to Garden of Eden.
No, even though I was few times into this book.
Yeah, but and thirdly, we never had country music, and Vlado Grežo and I and Vlado and myself, we organized also together all kinds of things, but he introduced me to concept that country music is something which bonds all of us somehow together. And these two guys are top country musicians in country, I just felt that it resonated so well, whether we are Slovaks or Americans or whoever. Somehow, country music is not only linking us Slovaks and Americans, but practically everybody. So I'm very happy that two musicians created such a joy at the very beginning. But now, coming to book and why, actually, first experiment was, my shorter version was done in 2010, when I believe that 20 years is good time for young nation just to reflect. And Eva Salnerova is here. At that time we had Todd Sedgwick, so we launched the thing, and Senator Spell grandson or son-in-law was here at that time. And in 2018, it was 100th anniversary of Czechoslovakia, where United States played such a profound role that our diaspora, Czechs and Slovaks, together were thinking about common state, Masaryk, Stefanik, and all of this glorious time. And there were many celebrations, both here and at Pittsburgh. So we did second, and now we are celebrating 30th anniversary of bilateral ties. So I try to add last 5 years to the story since Velvet Revolution. And I can tell you that it was big joy working on it, but I was suffering a bit because last 5 years were not so glorious than previous years because of COVID and how COVID has shaped and changed international order and how it has changed relations also among us and United States and all of them. Then we thought that we are in all these vaccine repatriations and so on. So I felt that this was a rather complicated period when Americans and Slovaks worked together, helped each other as much as they could. But then this outbreak of war in Ukraine, when for me it was the most bizarre thing in the last 3 decades to comprehend what is this and how should I frame it, because all of these war just showed how vulnerable we are, and that Europe, which was source of 2 world wars, suddenly something with global impact started here. And just shortly before that, I saw the biggest madness in Slovak-US relation, and it was discussion on DCA, Defense Cooperation Agreement, where I couldn't believe how small some of our leaders could be, and how they are capable of manipulating public and framed issues between our 2 countries. And some of them until today are portraying US in colors which even president of the country has trouble with and is part of all of this. So but at the same time, the last 5 years were fascinating changes in the United States. Americans have Donald Trump, which none of us believed that personality with that abilities could become president of the United States, and he did. We have until now Slovak president, first woman, who became advocate of transatlantic relations and personally contributed a great deal to that. But turnover of foreign ministers was magnificent. In 4 years, 4 foreign ministers, 4 prime ministers. It just shows that our country is in flux, and we are lucky that Bridget Brink was here with her very positive attitude. And since she did a great job, now she's ambassador in Kiev. And we are extremely lucky that we have Gautam Rana with such a positive attitude. I can tell you there are few people who have such a great hope about this country than he. But this is not, sometimes I felt that he doesn't have enough information. that dummy and embassy is hiding and creating and having him Tatras and folklore and opera, Košice and all kinds of, but
he expressed a classic American pioneer spirit.
Positive thinking sometimes drives us nuts. But in his case, It is great, Joy Gautam, to talk to you because you know so much about us. And even if we are in this crossroad situation, that you are still believing in us and looking at longer term thing, and that if in spirit of friendship which opened up 30 years ago, that we could count on the United States, and that all web of relations between diplomats, politicians, businesses, culture, education, wherever we look, I think there are so many of them. And that is why for me it was great joy working with Tami and all embassy and Slovak Foreign Policy Association represented by Tomáš, Jitka, and University Library and Foreign Ministry, which played, I mean, we just created team spirit, which I hope that will create memorable evening for all of you. And each of you at the end will get a copy, which is bilingual and fully illustrated by pictures, which are depicting this incredible, rich story of young, small, democratic Slovakia with superpower called the United States. But last but not least, we are in the same boat. None of us, whether you are American or whether you are Slovak, you do not know results of elections. None of us know how we will fight together to help Ukrainians win.
I would say we are lucky that we are living in a country where you do not know the results of elections.
Yeah.
Ahead of the elections, there are countries which they know.
Thank you for this. And sign of the time is the American patriot system is operated by German soldiers. For me, these are the paradoxical situations in this country. But anyhow, I do not want to occupy more time. I just wanted, since I'm not a government official, I can be more free in my assessment. And since I'm trying to depict it and describe it in such a way that it would be understandable for you, I'm thinking in these last 33 years, since Velvet Revolution until today, as a period of enormous importance, not only for history of this country, but for me it's a very personal story. That is why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pavel. And it really is a great book, and the photographs are lovely. I highly recommend that everybody take a good look through it, and you'll see some wonderful images in there, including our, who was ambassador to Czechoslovakia at the time, Shirley Temple Black, when she came in to raise the flag over the building when it was reopened. For many of you may not know, we actually have had the building on Vyacheslavovo náměstí since 1948. We actually own it. Part of it is ours, and part of it is owned by the Ministry of Culture. We were in there from 1948 to 1950. Claiborne Pell, when he was a very young Foreign Service officer, was actually our consul. And then, unfortunately, in 1950, the situation took a turn to where he was no longer welcome, and he was asked to leave. And he did, but we retained the building. So we have always been here, and that's something that I think is really important to underscore, that even when we weren't physically able to be here, we were still here. We were here very much in spirit and very much in thought. And I share my ambassador's positive outlook on Slovakia, frankly. I go out and I speak to schools all the time. And when I walk away from speaking to a high school class, I think to myself, we're okay. Like, the kids are all right. The future is going to be brighter than we think it is, because truly, this is a phenomenal country with phenomenal people, and we see it everywhere that we go. So I think I do think that there are many challenges, but I think that there is also really good equipment, and our relationship, which has endured through many decades, is strong and will continue to be strong. And with that, actually, our second question for our panelists. In your opinion, what are today's key challenges and the dilemmas facing our relationship? And actually, I'll start with our ambassador.
All right, thanks. I forgot to mention the first time around, before I came out in early September last year, 2022, I visited your excellent ambassador in Washington, Radovan Javorczyk, and he gave me a few pairs of socks, which I always pull out for special occasions. So I want to note that this is a special occasion, so I always pull them out. Again, emblematic of our close relationship. I do want to start by saying, I think one of the reasons I'm so optimistic about this country is I think Slovaks are too hard on themselves. I think you are a young country with 30 years of history. And if you look at, I'm a data guy, if you look at any sort of data from where you were in 1993 to where you are now, you've made substantial and incredible progress. And you did two incredibly smart things in the last 30 years. You joined NATO and you joined the European Union. And those are terrific guardrails, both for your democracy, as well as in terms of providing stability, security, prosperity. And the other thing is that I guess it's just personal. We as diplomats get a chance to travel around the world, live in places all over the world. Slovakia's doing really well compared to the rest of the world. I think, maybe partly I've served a lot of places which are really, really hard, but I think you guys are oftentimes too hard on yourselves. I'm not saying there's not challenges, there are, absolutely, but I think a lot of the challenges that Slovaks are taking personally are actually global challenges. Things like economic issues, inflation, Ukraine, other types of things. But that's why I remain highly optimistic like Tammy. I've gone to dozens and dozens of schools, talked to university students, high school students, business people across this country. I've been out to Košice now 6 or 7 times, and I've been struck by, and lots of places in between, by the energy that's in this country that exists outside of the Bratislava bubble. But in terms of the question, there's, I think, 3 main areas of challenge that I can think of. One, of course, is Ukraine. I want to begin by just simply acknowledging the incredible bravery, heroism of the Ukrainian people. Slava Ukraini, to my brother ambassador here. And that remains the challenge for Europe, for the United States, for NATO, for Slovakia. And we have to stay strong. There is no other option. And it's especially true for Slovakia because the last thing you want is for Ukraine to lose and to have Russian soldiers on your border. It undermines your security, it undermines your prosperity. And so we have to stay strong on Ukraine. We have to stay united. We have to support the Ukrainian people. And that's, to me, there's no compromise on that. Second is disinformation. We live in a world where there's just so much disinformation. It impacts our elections, it impacts our democracies, it impacts the way we live. And one of the goals, of course, of the purveyors of disinformation is to splinter our societies, to challenge our democracies, to make us question our leaders, to make us question each other. And frankly, they're damn good at it. And we really haven't found good responses yet. I think we will continue struggling with it. But we'll hopefully do it together. We provided almost now $5 million in assistance to your disinformation program with the Ministry of Defense. We'll look at other opportunities, but this is, I think, going to be an ongoing challenge. The third one is climate change. This is one where we universally need to work together on this. And once again, I'm really proud of some of the collaboration that we've now done with Slovakia. Slovakia just signed a deal with Westinghouse. You'll be getting nuclear fuel from Westinghouse and no longer from the Russians longer term. But more importantly than that is Project Phoenix. This is something that I'm very proud of. Slovakia just signed an agreement to work with the United States. The goal of this is to have coal burning plants and to transition them over the coming decades into carbon neutral small modular reactors. This is the technology of the future. And so again, we're cooperating on this, but I think this is an area of global concern. We all need to be focused on it, and hopefully we can work on global solutions.
Thank you very much, sir. And now over to the foreign minister.
Yeah. Well, I would say subscribe to all of what Gautam said. If I would think about the challenges, I would talk about 3 areas. First one is security. the war in our neighborhood, immediate neighborhood, I think, challenged our view of security, and Pavel already mentioned the bizarre debate we had on defense cooperation agreement with the US. It was in January last year, and we somehow do not remember the timeline because the events went so fast, but just 1 month after it, we got a full proof how important this cooperation is. I mean, it couldn't be stronger message, and everything was turned from the head back to the legs, and at least for reasonable people. So security is one of the issues where we cooperate strongly. My good colleague Martin Sklenar just visited United States, watching the F-16s prepared for use in Slovakia. We would love to relieve our Czech and Polish and Hungarian friends of air policing of Slovakia. So I hope it will come very soon. And we have a multinational NATO group in Slovakia, and I think that's another proof how important is the alliance. And I see the Italian ambassador here. It's good to have your soldiers here. I mean, we feel the strength of the alliance in practice these days, and it's very important. And then the second area is the area of disinformation, or how we handle the information space, and not only in Slovakia. I mean, it's a challenge everywhere, including the United States. I mean, this is like a cancer. It's attacked the very fabric of societies, and we didn't find yet a strong answer to this challenge. We are doing it together. I had several consultations in the United States at the State Department when I was there in May, in my previous capacity as a foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister. And the third area for me is democracy in the world. Democracy here in this country, but democracy in the world. We have to work together how to strengthen the attractiveness of democracy, because for a while it looked like the totalitarian regimes or undemocratic regimes became more attractive in some areas, and they show that there is a efficiency, while the dictator doesn't care about the others and can make a decision. In our societies it takes a while, but I think the result is much better, and in the long term the prosperity, and in the long term the quality of life in democracy is incomparable with anything else.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foreign Minister. Pavel.
Yeah, I would start with one wish, which is connected with challenge. I wish that we would have, after these elections, same-minded foreign minister, or a minister who believes in transatlanticism as last ministers whom we had. If I see this covered period, Miroslav Wlachovský, Ivan Korčok, who was just brought from ambassadorial position, Rastislav Káčer, who used to be our foreign minister, Miroslav, who served under Martin Bútora when he was ambassador there. We are very lucky that we have clear-cut professionals who were running our diplomatic service and were always absolutely clear how to build relations, together also with our defense ministers, because particularly in this challenging period of DCA, when Ivan Korčok and Jaroslav Naď were labeled traitors and all kinds of nonsensical accusations. So they survived and managed very well. So I wish that we would have continuity in Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this is one big challenge because it is not obvious that this may happen. I hope we will, but the second, many young people like to go and work, study in the West, United States. Embassy has many programs, Fulbright and all kinds of programs. So Slovakia is struggling how to keep young people at home. This dilemma of going, learning, coming back, I think was never more important than now, because we are facing the situation that loyalty to state and trust in state has declined very significantly. So I wish that those who will go and learn in the United States will not be kept in the United States, that whether they are scientists, culture figure, or young future diplomats, businessmen, I think that for Slovakia this is an enormous challenge, and we need to think how to build like a renewed sense of patriotism, also stressing it. And role of women, I think that in last 4 years, when Joe Biden came here and visited borders between Slovakia and Ukraine and met refugees, accompanied by Karen Donfried, my former colleague at German Marshall Fund, was Undersecretary of Assistant Secretary of State. It was one of those very powerful moments when at Mother's Day, First Lady goes there, then crosses the border and meets a First Lady of Ukraine. I think that, and Bridget, who was here, and now Ingrid Brodskova, who is now going to Prague as our ambassador, she started together with Miroslav and several others there. So I think that, and Ingrid Brodskova together with ministry highlighted the role of women in diplomacy, in public life, in more general, in innovation and so on. So I feel that here United States has a lot to offer to us, and together we need to build this pillar of our international relations. So these would be some of my additions, but what two of my friends, Gautam and Miroslav, said, I fully subscribe. Disinformation, democracy, and all of it. I just wanted to add a few more things.
Thank you very much, Pavel. And now, before we actually turn it over to launching the book, I wanted to see if there's any questions from our distinguished members of the audience.
Yes, dear friends, we heard a lot of positive hope, crossroads, and also one thing we touched maybe, that is the symbolic value of the building on the Priateľ. And it will be at the end my question. I remember about 12 years ago a discussion in the city parliament in Bratislava concerning defense. And it was a very hard discussion where I remember exactly 3 people stood against the rest of the parliament in question of protection of US embassy and fence and all this. I remember, of course, myself, but I remember also the late mayor of city, who was a leftist, a wise leftist, Vtáčnik. We had been only 3 who defended the position of US embassy at Vízovlav Square. And I think it's of great value to have the view on the embassy with US flag in heart of Bratislava. That's why I am asking Excellency, what is the future of the embassy? Because I remember a nice visit with Excellency Skip Valley years ago. with view from the window of his office to the flag and to the square. And for me, I am labeled as a traitor of the Slavic Brotherhood, as an agent of, you can choose, CIA or strictly George Soros. But for me, it's an important question that the people who labeled, not only me, a lot of us in discussion about the defense agreement, that we are traitors, that they should see that US is here as he's with us. So if you could say me, what will be the future?
Sure, absolutely. So let me begin by thanking you for your support and all those who have supported us through the years. I know that the fence has been a challenge. I think we've gotten to the place where it's aesthetically better, but I know it's been a challenge for the people of Bratislava, and it's been misused politically. Unfortunately, it's the world that we live in, and unfortunately, after the, for those who don't know, we had embassies in 1998 that were car bombed, and we lost hundreds and hundreds, and I want to say like 300, 400 of our local and American staff in these embassies. So unfortunately, it's the world that we live in. So I appreciate the support that we've received from the people of Bratislava, from the governments. What does the future hold? We are looking at a new facility, and it has nothing to do with giving up our old one. It's just that we need to have a more modern building, larger for the future. I'll give you one specific issue, right? In our building, just simply because of the fact of the history of how it works, we are trying to become a more inclusive foreign service, inclusive country. And if I were to have a foreign service officer, a fellow colleague who was in a wheelchair, that person would not be able to come to my office because of the construction of the building. And that there's no way, given how it's designed, that we could get someone who was in a wheelchair. And that's not fair, right? We have to have buildings as the United States government that resembles our people, and that gives everyone opportunity, but we also want to modernize our facilities, all that. So we do hope to have something new, but I can't give you a timeline. We're talking with the city. We're gonna have to find internal funding and work on this, but we will eventually move to have a building, again, that meets the requirements of the 21st century. But we appreciate all that's been done in the past, and I think this historic building has a very huge and important symbolic value. I agree with you.
Sir.
A word from the publisher, and I promise to be very brief, so we all have the opportunity to enjoy some daylight in the Garden of Eden. Well, it was already said that the presented book already has the older brother, right? Which was published in 2018, the previous edition. Why I'm saying so, I am repeating so, because we, as the publisher of the previous editions, had the privilege to have several dozens of copies of that book. And I can tell you that all of them are gone. There are no left, with the exception of the two that are in our archive. I think this is going to be destiny for the current edition as well. And for those who won't get a printed copy, there will be the opportunity to withdraw the electronic version. These are the benefits of the 21st century from the SFPA's website. So I'd like to encourage you to also look for the electronic version of the book. And on a positive note, we, meaning the SFPA, 3 days ago, we published scenarios on the post-election development of Slovakia when it comes to foreign security and European policy. The three scenarios rank from the, so to say, most pessimistic to the very optimistic. But frankly speaking, none of the authors is really convinced or believes that the most pessimistic scenario would materialize. So this provides us with certain hope, definitely, that the world won't end on the 30th of September, that the Slovak-US bilateral relations will continue to develop. The ambassadors, the new ambassadors will be coming, the new ministers will be coming, but Pavel will stay and remain. So, what I can say is that I personally am very much looking forward to present the next edition of this book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that seems like the perfect segue to launch the book.
I just wanted a few more thanks before
Sure.
launch, if I may, because I didn't want to occupy too much time at the beginning, but there are few people whom I want to thank before we will launch. Will be over there, and then you will be welcome to take copy after that. But I wanted to, every book, it's like child, sort of. You cannot sort of, if I publish this year 30 years of UK, and at that time we invited Miroslav to be godfather because he was former ambassador to UK.
Yeah.
But now he will be godfather because he is foreign minister. And the foreign ministry was kind enough to help us to put together this event. But I wanted to thank my wife Veronica, who is here, who is surviving my evenings with the books, besides my other activities, since I cannot stop taking pictures of butterflies and flowers and doing all kinds of other things. Stano Zurianin, who is here, he is editor of my Slovak, because my Slovak is quite lousy, and he is the best Slovak editor whom I ever found. And he is professionally IT person, but he has unique feel for the language of us Slovaks. So Stano, thank you very much. Zuzka Chmelová couldn't be with us. She is graphic designer, and Zuzana, every piece what she is doing, this cannot be done as before, so she was designing together with Tami and colleagues, needed to approve her graphic design, but as you will see, this is very fresh, modern. Zuzana is not with us. Then Igor, where is he? Photographer. Igor is my dear fellow photographer, together with photographers from Foreign Ministry, Government Office, and Presidential Office, because I was trying to get the best images possible. So Igor played profound role, and Slovak Press Agency was very kind that they opened archives for looking at and finding things. And Rastio Káčer, who together with Gautam and Radovan Javorčík wrote forward. Rastio couldn't be with us because he has some international travel. I am very grateful that they wrote from their perspective where we are now. In these relations, Miroslav gave his account, which is very valuable, that each of us are putting in front of you some of our feeling about these relations. And also Radovan Javorčík, who is our ambassador in Washington, a personal story. When I was advisor to our first president, Radovan was fellow with me, so now he's in Washington, and so he stayed 6 months then with us. So unfortunately he cannot be here, but he already has the book. And last but not least, since Madam President is flying to the United States, to UN, together with Minister,
Saturday.
I want Minister then, if you could take peace to board of airplane, because last picture in the book is Madam President with Joe Biden, whom she will meet yet again next week. So things are going on. I'm very grateful again that you came, and after we will have book launch, we can then enjoy evening in Heavenly Garden or Garden of Eden. We need to agree yet on proper English translation, but the garden was for Claricine nuns who enjoyed and meditated in this garden. Thank you very much, and Tammy, you were a great moderator.
Thank you.